Good afternoon to everyone. I thought I'd start today with a bit of a story, and it's one that took place in 2018 when I was in New Delhi, and I went for a coffee brewing workshop, a coffee brewing 101, and that was really early on in my career. And the host that day went around the room and asked everyone what they thought of when they heard the word coffee. One answer was a cappuccino. Another answer was the aromas that you get when you walk past a cafe. Another answer was something that wakes me up in the morning. And for me, when it was my turn to answer, my answer was it was a plant. In that moment, and upon introspection later, I quickly realized, and it fits into the theme for today, a lot of this needed reframing. I looked at it as a living plant among an ecosystem, while a lot of other people looked at it as if almost like the caffeine angle and something that's traded as a commodity on the market. And so this is the backstory to all of this. Hi guys, my name is Pranoy Thipaiah, and I am the 5th generation to be lucky enough to be overseeing, supervising, and managing the land that is called Kerehaklu. It might be a bit difficult to say. In our language of Kannada, Kere means lake, and Haklu means a shelter. So it quite literally translates to the shelter by the lake. My great-great-grandfather in 1953 was the first person to actually convert rice paddy fields into coffee, and ever since we've been growing coffee. And I was actually in Australia for my studies up until 2017, and it really bothered me about how you'd go to a cafe and you would see various countries like Colombia and Guatemala and family names and farm names, but India was not in the picture, and my farm, Kerehaklu or estate, was not over there. There's various ways within which I can describe Kerehaklu. If I were to write it down, or if I'm filling out a form, I would say what we do is we grow coffee in biodiverse agroforestry conditions, but that might come across as jargon to some people. And so I like this phrase, a food forest, which I borrowed from permaculturists. Permaculturists use this phrase to describe similar ecosystems. And why I call it that, or why I like to call it that, is because you can actually divide it up into 4 different layers. The canopy, the uppermost layer, where we have a lot of indigenous trees, primarily indigenous trees, fig, red cedar, rosewood, a lot of different species. The understory, as we call it, has avocados, pomelos, lime, lemon, mostly citrus. The shrub level is where coffee grows, and below that is the soil level, where we actually have a lot of different things going on. Nutritious soil, what we call mycorrhizal networks in the soil, and so there's a lot of things going on. But very quickly, I wanted to show you and talk about an incident that happened in 2021. It was the second lockdown, and I was in Chikmaglur at Kerehaklu, and my dad has these motion sensing cameras, which we put on different trees if we identify a pathway that an animal is taking. And it was a Monday morning, and he noticed we had an elephant come visit, and we have a lot of large mammals come visit. So we put this camera up on a tree on a Monday morning, and all of Tuesday it had rained. So that afternoon or that evening, he actually asked me to walk past the camera and take a cloth and actually wipe the lens, because sometimes it fogs up. And so at 5:57, going this way, was a photograph of me and my dog, who you saw before. And just over 10 minutes later was a tiger going this way. And that for me is a perfect display or portrayal of coexistence. In the background over there also is a 400-year-old fig tree, which we know as keystone species, which are essential for ecosystems. And so for us, we cross paths quite literally with all kinds of flora, fauna, and fungi. And before going any further, I quickly thought I'd tell you about what coffee is, in case you don't actually know the process. And it might surprise people, but coffee is actually a fruit. And we actually call it a cherry, or a coffee cherry, as you can see. And the color behind me, the crimson red, as we call it, is the perfect ripeness. It's the perfect time to actually come and harvest the coffee. We do it by hand. We don't have mechanized sort of ways of harvesting like they do in Brazil and Vietnam. In India, we do it by hand. And so this cherry over here is where it all begins. And it's really important to remember it or think of it as a fruit. This goes through a long, long process, and the coffee cherry or the coffee fruit, I like to think of it, or an analogy that I can make is a peanut. And the shells of the peanut is the skin of the fruit, and more often than not you have two nuts in there. That's the two seeds, which you can see behind me, which I'm holding in my hand. And those are what eventually become the coffee beans that we roast and drink every morning or every other morning. And so this long process actually starts off in November, December. We float it. And when I was a kid, my grandmom we used to have chickens and eggs. And so a way to actually check if a raw egg or an egg was rotten was that you put it in water and it would float. The same logic here with coffee cherries actually come to the surface if something is wrong with it. And so we're actually skimming off the surface and making sure that everything that is sunk, we're able to process. The first step to follow is called fermentation or post-harvest processing. I could give a 20-minute talk about processing on its own, but I'll save that for another time. And then we can actually dry these. We dried either the coffee fruit or the coffee beans in a controlled manner, either outdoor or indoor, depending on our goals. And finally, I come in and taste. I've been working on my palate for a few years now, and that's something that producers didn't really do. And that's another thing that needed reframing, where people actually don't think of producers as people who know their coffee or know what they're talking about. We actually have to often pay a professional to taste our coffee and give us a response. And so I actually taste this coffee after roasting it, and this process is called cupping, which is a sensorial analysis. And basically I'm able to judge the coffee. None of this would have been possible if not for a person called Baba Budan. The story goes, or the legend goes, that in the 17th century, Baba Budan was a Sufi saint from Yemen, and he actually smuggled. And why I say smuggled is because the transportation of coffee outside Yemen at that time was illegal. And so one story says that he actually had 7 beans smuggled in his beard. Another story actually says that he strapped it to his chest. But it was brought to India, to the hills of Chikmaglur, and that was the birthplace of coffee outside what we know as the Arabian Peninsula. That was a momentous occasion because from here, from India, via the Portuguese, coffee went to Rio in Brazil, and via the Dutch to Java, which is modern-day Indonesia, and thus began the expansion of coffee around the world. And that's really important because India, for me, and how we grow coffee is like nowhere else on earth. I consult for producers in Eastern Africa, in Uganda, also in Sri Lanka, and I visited farms in Indonesia, Malaysia, but nowhere else on earth does coffee grow like it does in India. And some of you here might have been to a tea estate or a tea garden, and when you're standing on one side of a hill in a tea estate and you look straight ahead, you'll be able to see for kilometers. But over here, if you picked a random point at Kerihaklu and look straight ahead, there's probably a tree rocking away about 5 meters away, and many hundred trees behind that. And so we do this to protect ourselves. We mimic the forest that's around us, and all of these things actually contribute to the taste of your coffee. The giant Malabar squirrel, the tiger walking through, sometimes a hornbill in the canopy, all of these things affect your cup of coffee, and that's something we're really, really proud of, and I don't think people talked about much before. All of this to say, I think one of the most important aspects of my family and the legacy that I've had to follow and will be following, is that we're actually, or we have been generationally really good documenters and archivers. Since 1953, when Kerehakluu was founded, the 1st of Jan 1953 until today, my great-great-grandfather started this tradition of actually recording every single day of rainfall. So we have rainfall records for over 70 years now, as well as coffee trading records, coffee harvest records, and those are huge data sets. Those are massive data sets which I've come in and started digitizing. I started putting on Excel, and all of this is really important because I consider it handed down wisdom. I think of it as something that you can't really teach. It's a gut feeling, it's an instinct that's learned over time. And when I was quite young and naive, I thought I'd do it my way, but I quickly realized that my dad has been doing things for a reason, and my ancestors before that as well. But that's not enough. And this is where I've come in. I like to be scientific about my approach. I think combining handed down wisdom with scientific advancements, with various bits of technology, and this is a small example that you can see behind me. If you saw, this is our coffee drying yard and where our coffee dries during the harvest. If you came 10 to 40 years ago, anywhere in that window, this was an open yard. There was no cover, and that's because the monsoon, for example, was very predictable. Right now we get unseasonal rains, and I just took it into my own hands to actually protect what we do and have a shaded area, because all of the things that we're doing now in what we call specialty coffee are quality forward or quality focused. And a big thing that you might have heard of and you might talk about is the climate. In a big city, I think maybe you felt the summers get hotter, and that might involve turning the fan speed up a notch or reducing the air conditioning temperature. But for us, the plants are suffering. The plants are genuinely suffering, and we do what we can by adding more trees, adding more of the canopy to actually act as a buffer zone for the plants below. But you can't control everything. It's out of your hands, and the weather systems that are huge. So once again, we make sure that we control whatever we can in ways which we can. But it's not just that, it's the people. And I'm sure a lot of people over here, I'm 31 now. When I was 24, I started off, and the photograph of the person behind me, his name is Manjunath. I've seen him ever since I was born. He's been working with us. His kids are also my age, but no one wants to work on a farm in India now. No, I can tell you that. When I started off, I was the only person from my generation who was involved. Everyone else was my dad's colleagues were my dad's age, and so that's a harsh reality, but I always feel with the combination of all of these things, with reframing the past and looking at the future of resilience, we can get it done. Along this way, I think something that has not just bothered me, but something that I've been looking at pushing and conveying in the right way is the language that we use. I think language is really important, where we can say the wrong thing really quickly off the top of our tongues. And so we hear Italian coffee, we hear Swiss chocolate and Belgian chocolate, and because of arguably colonial hangovers, we automatically think it's better than what we have. You see Belgian chocolate ice cream and you're like, wow, I'm going to get that. But Italy doesn't grow coffee. Belgium and Switzerland don't grow cacao or cocoa. India does. Also does Ghana, also does, so many other places around the world. And for me, it's really important that we respect the origin and respect the people. And so all of this to say the wisdom, the science, the gut feeling, the people, the hardship, it's really important to communicate this and for the rest of the world to actually know what we are about and how whatever it is that you consume today and where it came from. So this is something that Subco Coffee in Mumbai recently launched, and I didn't ask for this. This was them. They call it Project Young Gun, and over there it says conservation meets specialty, working to preserve biodiversity. A bit of a testament to my work, but I'm not saying this to show off or anything, but I want to encourage people that people will recognize your story if you're persistent enough. If you tell it long enough, and if you're passionate enough, they will recognize that and see value in it. And so In 2019, we started off with working with just 3 roasters as Chikmaglur as a brand. 3 roasters in India, 2 in Delhi and 1 in Mumbai. And as of literally a couple weeks ago, we work with 122 in the UK, Australia, Europe, North America, and I'm looking at the Middle Eastern markets to follow. And so, yeah, I just want to encourage people that there's always value in what we do. And finally, I want to say be proud. And there's various ways we can look at this, because yeah, I think we all have stories that our grandmother or grandfather could have told us, the people around us who work in various fields, and it's really important to listen to them, make note of them, whether it's a cooking recipe or whether it's anything, because if we don't tell our stories, no one will. And finally, I just want to say that the next time you have a cup of coffee from Chikmaglur, I hope you see the hills of where we come from. Thank you very much.